Good morning and Shabbat Shalom, everyone. The opening of this week's Torah portion is the story of Abraham purchasing the cave of Machpelah in Hebron as a burial site for his wife Sarah. And the Torah at great length discusses the negotiations and the acquisition of the cave of Machpelah. And at first, when Abraham approaches a man by the name of Ephron and says, "I would like to acquire this cave as a burial plot for my wife," Ephron responds to Abraham and says, "Abraham, you are a distinguished person. You are a prince in our midst. And therefore, there's no charge. You can take it for free." But then Abraham insists on paying for it and not taking the burial plot for his wife free of charge. And at that point, Ephron says, "Well, okay, if you want to pay, what is 400 silver coins for such a plot of land?" And our rabbis say that at this point, he extorted him and overcharged him and took advantage of his vulnerability and his desire to acquire this plot. And Abraham weighs the 400 silver coins and gives it to Ephron. And our rabbis contrast this story with the story of Abraham in the previous Torah portion. In the opening of last week's Torah portion, we read about the 3 guests that Abraham invited into his home. And Abraham runs towards these guests and invites them into the home and says, "Please be my guests, and I will give you a little bread to satisfy yourself before you travel on your way." But then after he promises them some bread and water, what does Abraham do? He runs and he gets milk and cream, and then he asks Sarah to bake cakes, and then he asks his son Yishmael to go take a calf, tender and good, and he prepares a lavish meal for his 3 guests. And our rabbis say we should always be like Abraham and never be like Ephron. You see, Abraham was a man who fulfilled the dictum of the rabbis, "Emor miat v'aseh harbe." Say little and do a lot. Don't overpromise. Just be humble, but then deliver much more than you promised. Abraham says, "I'll give you some bread and water," but in reality, he gives them milk and cream and cakes and meat. On the other hand, Ephron is the opposite. He says a lot. "Here, take it for free, no charge. I'm so generous, you don't have to pay me." But then he does very little. Not only doesn't he give it for free, but he overcharges, takes advantage of Abraham. And our rabbis are teaching us that what matters is not what we say. There's some people who say, "Sure, I'll do this, I'll do that," but then when it comes to action, they fall very short. And others don't say much, but they speak with their actions. And that's the example of Abraham versus Ephron. This week we had Emily Damari, one of the hostages, who was abducted in Kfar Aza on October 7th. And she told her story here in Palm Beach, how the terrorists came and they shot her dog right before her eyes. And then they shot her and injured her, blowing off 2 of her fingers. And then they took her into Gaza. And they said, "We need to take you to a hospital." And she said, "No, I don't want to go to a hospital in Gaza. If you want to take me to an Israeli hospital because you blew off my fingers, that's fine, but not to Gaza." And she actually said to the terrorists, "I'd rather die. Shoot me now, but don't take me to Gaza." And they said, "No, we have to treat you, we have to take care of you." And they took her into Gaza and took her to the hospital in Gaza. And the doctor came to her bedside and said, "Hi, I'm Dr. Hamas." And then they put her under without even asking her. When she woke up, her 2 fingers were amputated. And they held her in captivity for 471 days until she was released in January of this year. And this is an example of people who profess goodness and kindness. "We're going to take care of you. We're going to take you to the hospital," at the same time that they're abducting her and kidnapping her and torturing her for over a year's time in captivity. And with all of their religiosity and their grandiose professing righteousness, their actions betray everything they say and everything they speak. In reality, they're cruel. And that is the example of Ephron. Don't just say words. Your actions is what matters most. Avram teaches us what it means to be a Jew, to not just speak, but to act. One of the stories that Emily Damari said was that she was sitting with the terrorists, her abductors, her captors, and they were watching Al Jazeera TV, and they were showing a pro-Palestinian, pro-Gaza protest, anti-Israel at Columbia University. And there in the crowd, there were people holding signs that said, "Queers for Gaza." And she turned to her Hamas abductor, terrorist, and said, "Tell me, do you have any queers here in Gaza?" And they said, "No, we don't know about queers." She said, "What do you do when you have someone who's queer?" And they said, "We kill him." And then she said, "What's if it's your best friend who's queer?" She said, "It doesn't matter, we have to kill him." And then she said, "What if your own brother is queer? What would you do then?" Without flinching, without hesitation, they said, "It doesn't matter if it's our best friend or it's our brother. Queers are put to death here in Gaza." And she said, she looked at these useful idiots standing there with signs, "Queers for Gazans," thinking to herself, you're supposed to be educated, you go to Columbia, you're here talking about how you stand up for Gaza. If you came here, you would be put to death. Remember, it's not what you say. Most important is what you do. Have a wonderful Shabbat.